Hello, everyone, and welcome to ISCA's Art Innovation Talks, quarterly presentations designed to educate and inspire creativity and innovation. I'm Kimberly Gill, along with Mary Lou Dykstra and the Art Innovation Talks Committee, and we'd like to thank you for being here this afternoon to this very special live Zoom presentation. This is the second in our AIT series, and we are thrilled today to have the fabulous Renee Kahn presenting. Also very happy to have Liz Walker as our host and Haley Joseph as our moderator. Haley will be taking your questions during and after the presentation via chat. A big thank you to all three of them for sharing their expertise and their time with us today. So Liz, shall we get this presentation started?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's see. I lost you.
Oh, my mic is on. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, but I don't see you.
Spotlight me. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to spotlight you.
Let's see if I can do myself.
All right, I think you can.
Can I? Let's see.
Oh, nope, here I go. I found you.
Oh, add spotlight. Ooh, you mean to remove yours. Okay, close enough.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay, hello.
Thank you so much.
We've got it. All right. Thanks for coming. Today's presenter is artist Renee Kahn, ISCA member from Charleston, South Carolina, by way of New York City. Renee is going to take us on a journey through her life and her art. She has tapped into a way of creatively expressing her conscious and subconscious emotions in her paintings that has been therapeutic and transformative. Renee's conceptual approach to her work, particularly the figure, is shaped by emotions and memories of past experiences. Her work begins with a strong emotion or reaction to a situation, which she conveys by experimenting with design, composition, and color combinations to create a compelling visual statement. Color that renders emotion is the prime ingredient of her work. Renee's goal is to create maximum intensity using minimal elements. This simplicity allows the viewer to focus on the colors and the emotion or message being conveyed. Today, Renee is going to share her story of how her artistic journey has come full circle, back to her early roots as an art student. She encourages all artists to embrace their own real truth and find their artistic voice. Renee was born and educated in New York City. She began painting at a young age and attended the Art Students League of New York and the High School of Music and Art. She majored in art at the City College of New York and went on to receive her master's degree at Brown University. Renee is an active member of ISCA. She has earned her Nautilus Fellowship status and proudly serves on multiple ISCA committees. She lives in Charleston, South Carolina with her husband, Dr. Sewell Kahn. Renee's work has been exhibited nationally and internationally in China, Canada, and Israel. Her artwork has appeared in the following books: Transparent Watercolor by Inessa Derkach, Revealing World Religions by Cynthia Eller, and in Jewish Women in the Visual Arts by Hedwig Brenner. Renee is a founding member of the Charleston Professional Artists Association and is a speaker coach for TEDx Charleston. And we ask that any comments or questions you have be typed into the chat box, and Haley will pick those up later after the lecture. Without further ado, I bring you Renee Kahn.
All right. My art career started on my deathbed. Well, not really my deathbed, because I am sitting here today. But when I was 5 years old, I was seriously ill with the measles, and my parents really didn't think I was going to survive. And I remember those days as if it were yesterday. I remember my bedroom being dark. The curtains were closed, the shades were closed, something about light and the eyes of the measles patient, which was never quite explained to me, but light wasn't good. And I remember sitting in bed for hours, not knowing what to do, and wanting my mother to keep me company. But of course, she had things to do. She had to iron, she had to make dinner, whatever else. And she had to have a break from me too, I'm sure. But what I remember the most was the family physician coming into my room, holding aloft in his hand a huge hypodermic needle. And the needle itself looked like it was 12 inches long. And attached to that was the glass vial and the metal trappings that were on it. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was going to get a shot in my butt, and I was not a happy camper. Well, it turns out, very interestingly, that penicillin didn't cure the measles, but hey, who knew that in 1950? In any case, I struggled with as much might and main as I could, but my mother would have to sit on my legs and my father would have to hold my back down and I would get my shot. But there was one good thing that came about my having the measles. And that was when an aunt visited me. She brought me several coloring books and crayons. And I had never seen a coloring book before. And it was really exciting. This opened up a whole new world to me. Well, I was an artist now. And look how many decisions I had to make. Do I color in the lines? Am I allowed to color out of the lines? Can I make the sky purple with pink polka dots? Can I make the grass black, let's say? But knowing me and knowing that I was come from a very strict family and that I was a good little girl, I probably ran the boring route and made the grass green and the sky blue. But in any case, it was fun. And after I finished filling in all those coloring books, I asked my dad, hey, I'd love some more. Would you buy me some? And his answer absolutely surprised me. Oh, no, I'm not going to buy you any more coloring books. And I'm thinking, what have I done wrong? I've been so good. I've been quiet. I haven't been bothering my mother. What am I being punished for? So I asked him again, well, why not? I love it. This is so much fun. He said, nope, I will give you as much paper and pencils as you want, but you have to start using your imagination. Imagination? What the heck was imagination? I didn't have any imagination, but I knew one thing, I better go find me some. So in the ensuing years, with my white pieces of paper in front of me, staring me in the face and me trying to figure out what to put on them, I slowly got less intimidated by the white piece of paper, and I continued to draw. And when I was 12, I was really fortunate that my parents paid for, because we didn't have a lot of money, paid for me to take lessons at the Art Students League that was in 57th Street in Manhattan. And I lived on 200th Street. And it was quite a big deal for me to get on the train with my newsprint pad and my Conti crayons, take the train down to Midtown Manhattan, get out of the bus station and enter the Art Students League, this hallowed ground of art, and enter the class for young adults. And I remember the first day like it was yesterday. I walked in, and there in the middle of the room on a podium was a sculpture of a nude woman. And I thought, wow, this is progressive. I mean, I better get used to this. So I got my coat off, sat down, got my newsprint pad on the easel. And just as I was about to add pencil to paper, the sculpture got up and walked off for her break. Now, I had never seen a nude woman before. And this was pretty, I don't know if exciting is the right word. Shocking is more like it. But hey, I'm a New Yorker. I'm sophisticated here. So didn't say anything, got used to painting and drawing nude models. Well, by the time I got to high school or high school age, I didn't go to the Art Students League anymore. I went to High School of Music and Art and had several classes of art per day. And then I followed it with going to the City College of New York, where I majored in art and minored in art history and in comparative literature. And then, since I graduated in 1967, and the only thing open, or the most major thing open for women at the time, were either to be a nurse or a teacher, I then had to find a way to get my teacher certificate. So I applied to Brown University, ended up taking a Master's of Arts in Teaching at Brown. And as an aside, I followed through and stayed in Providence for 30 years. In the first several years, I did teach art history in one high school and ceramics and drawing in another high school. But while I was going to Brown University, I ended up seeing this particular painting. And this is by Qing Li, who's a Chinese artist. This is considered a Zen-like painting. And it attracted me because it is so simple, it is so beautiful, and the artist has been able, with a few brushstrokes, to get the essence of persimmons. And then, with just 6 persimmons, he was able to get a painting. And I really like the fact that this was down to the basics, down to the essence of what the artist wanted to say and what the persimmons was. So this style certainly attracted me. Well, I continued on at Brown. And one of my projects for my painting class was to do a triptych. Now, this is really a screen because it's 50 inches high by 56 inches wide. And as you can see, it has 3 panels. It is acrylic on canvas. And I have to say that this was painted in 1969, which was close to the 70s and the whole psychedelic movement. And the colors in the 70s were pretty bright and flamboyant. And I think I was influenced by that time for why I chose the colors. I don't know where this design came from. And the only thing that I can think of was that, well, I was a 20-year-old single woman. This painting to me looks very sensual. And I think that sort of fits into what I was at the time. And here you will see a close-up of it. And what's so interesting is when I think back, this was a German license plate. So that's how I was able to get this oval. Okay. Well, after I got graduated from Brown, I spent about, I would say 29, 30 years, 31 years experimenting. And I spent many years doing transparent watercolors, oil paints, pastels, collages, printmaking. And under the printmaking, I experimented in collagraphs, in monotypes, etchings, wood cuts and linoleum cuts. And to be a little bit more specific about my collages, I would work with paper. I would soak the paper in water, shape the pieces of paper, let them dry. And then I would have, when I would create my abstract, I would have a 3-dimensional piece of artwork, which I would then have to frame under a shadow box. Okay. So I had tried out all different types of material, and I had tried out still lifes and abstracts and figurative drawings and non-objective drawings and landscapes, but something was missing. And I really couldn't figure out what it was. I had to say that no direction at that time held my interest and really was a challenge. And maybe it was because at the time I was doing much more perceptual work. I was looking at things and I was painting them. And at that time, I happened to take a workshop with Ernest Velarde. And actually, I was lucky. I took 2 of them. One was in Myrtle Beach and one was in Calgary, Canada. And he was a professor in the California school systems. And he taught occasionally, he would teach workshops. And his premise was that you really had to know who you were as a person. What motivated you? What was your reason, not necessarily for living, but for painting? What did you want to say? What did you want to express? And when you figured that out, that would become true to you, and it would be seen by the viewer as being true to you. I mean, the viewer would understand that. Well, it wasn't easy to figure out who you were, because it's not just what's my personality and what do I like. You can like something that you can't paint, or you might not be interested in painting. So you had to get down, or I had to get down to the core of my being and who I was. Well, I knew that I was serious, and I knew that I was too serious for my own good. I knew that I analyzed everything to death. I definitely knew that I wasn't a detail person, that details made me nervous. So it seems that 30 years later, I realized that the style that I was painting in 1970 or 1969 during my master's, the triptych that I showed you, was really the style for me. It's a minimalistic style. It is shapes that are filled in with color. And if I have to analyze that, I can say, wait a minute, those coloring books really must have made an impression on me, which I haven't, didn't put together for years, but I think it did. So now I knew how I wanted to paint or the style I wanted to paint. Then I had to figure, well, what media do I want to paint with? What suits you the best? Again, I found that acrylic on canvas, on gallery wrap canvas, what suited me the best, because acrylics really are very versatile. They can become a wash or a glaze, or they can go the gamut to be very thick, and you can paint them in impasto with a palette knife. You can add modeling paste to them. You can add graphite powder. You can add sand. So it really is a media or medium that has a huge range of textures and surfaces. And I like the fact that you didn't have to frame gallery wrap canvas, because frames always got banged up in the studio or when you had to send them to shows. Now, the third thing I had to figure out was, now, what do you want to paint? You've run the gamut, but it occurred to me that I really like a challenge. And I like the challenge of painting emotions or concepts, because you had to spend a lot of time figuring out, how do I take an emotion, which is amorphous, or a concept that's amorphous, and how do I change it into color, shape, and form, and texture if I want to put texture in. And that challenge is what I found so thrilling and so exciting. So I also realized that as I enjoyed painting or wanted to paint emotions, I realized that sometimes my emotions were coming through, even though I wasn't aware that they were coming through, and I thought that I was painting something else. So let me explain what I was talking about. There were years, I won't go so far as to say years, but there was definitely one year where I was very, very depressed over a situation that was happening in my family. And as you know, a problem you can fix, you can try to solve a problem, but a situation, there's no solution for. You have to accept it. You have to accept it and go on with your life, because you don't have any control over it. In any case, I painted a series of paintings called the Bird Cellar series, which I will show you in a minute. And one of my friends, who is a member of ICA, came to my house and said, hey, Renee, let's put all those paintings, your 12 paintings, in a row, and let's see what you've done. Well, I actually was surprised to see how dark and somber the first paintings were. And at the end of the year, how much brighter and happier the last painting was, to show that even though I didn't realize it, I was working through my emotions through the course of the year. Okay, so this series that I'm talking about is called the Bird Cellar series. Now, the Bird Cellar series is a series of men and women who literally take around tiny sparrows, or what we call sparrows. I don't know how it's called in Indochina, but they take these baskets of sparrows to the parks, and people will come and they'll buy a little sparrow, and they'll hold the sparrow in their hand, and they'll say a prayer over the sparrow. They'll let it go, and their prayer goes directly to Buddha. That is their belief. And I thought, this is really fascinating, because Catholics will go to a church, they'll light a candle and say a prayer, and that goes directly to God. And for Jews, the holiest place to leave a message to God is in the Western Wall in Jerusalem. So I can't say every Jew, but most Jews who go to Israel will go to Jerusalem to see the Western Wall. It's also called the Wailing Wall. And this wall just for your information, is the retaining wall of the ancient temple that King Solomon built, which the Romans destroyed in 70 AD. And in that temple was one room that was called the Holy of Holies, and that was where God resided. Okay, so if somebody puts a message in the Western Wall, it is the closest to God that you could get. And so the Jew is convinced that God will hear your message. Okay, so enough talk. Let me start with showing you the first of several pictures of my of this series. Okay, so as I said before, this is a series where you're working through your emotions subconsciously. So I'm going to show you what I thought I was painting and then what I was really painting. In this painting called Holding On, you can see that's the beginning of the day. This is the first in the series. So the bird seller is holding on to these 5 baskets of birds. She's struggling taking them down the street. She's trying to balance them. And you can see that the colors are darker and the cages are all closed. The birds are all captive. And at this time, as I said before, I was barely holding on. I mean, I was really, really depressed, and I was holding on to getting through the day. Well, here I thought, it's the end of the day. She's taking a break. She's been standing on cement, or he's been standing on cement for hours at a time, and she's just tired. And the shoulders are slumped and the head is slumped. And I was so tired. I wasn't sleeping through the night. As soon as I would lie down, my head would go off in 100 directions, and the days were tough. And again, the colors are lighter, but the cages are still closed. Sorry about that. The cages are still closed, and I'm still with my trapped emotions. Here, oh, excuse me. Okay, here my thought was, well, the bird seller is holding up the cages for the customers. However, in my mind, as I looked at it, I'm really giving up my problems to a higher power because I can't do anything about it and I've got to survive. And so this is what this painting meant to me. And again, the birds are in the cages are closed. Not there yet emotionally. But now there's an inkling that I must be getting a little bit more relaxed, because the bird seller has no idea that the birds are flying, that there's one cage that's open, and that the birds or emotions are starting to be released, and that things are going in a better direction. Again, the colors are brighter. There's a yellow and a lighter orange, and the contrast of colors, to give you a little of the scintillation of colors, also shows that there's tension, but it's going in the right direction. And in this one, which is Escape, again, I painted the dress a dark color. Now you see all of the cages are open, the birds are flying, and not only that, but the figure is not upset that the birds are flying. She's accepted the situation, and that's exactly what I had come to the point. I don't know if I mentioned that there are 12 paintings in this series, and I'm only showing you 6. And this is the last one, and this is called Freedom, where I feel much better at the end of the year, and I think that it shows through this this painting. And the funny thing is that, again, I had absolutely no idea what was motivating me to paint these figures, to paint the position that the figures were in, or to paint the birds. It just came from someplace inside that I wasn't aware of, that I was subconscious about. Okay. Well, we then talked about how do you transform emotions into art when you're consciously doing it, because I was subconsciously doing it before. And I painted 12 paintings during COVID to explain or to express each emotion or anxiety that I felt during that particular period. But let me set the stage. We know that 2020 was like a sci-fi horror movie. We knew that when we left the house, you had no idea if you were going to get zapped by this evil and that you would even maybe become deceased because of it. You would go to the grocery store, and that was really a Herculean feat. You took your life in your hands when you went. So you'd have on your masks, you'd have on your gloves, you would wash down the cart, you'd take your food down, wash down the counter, wash down all the containers. It was a very difficult time. It was fraught with a lot of anxiety, plus the fact that you couldn't leave the house, you couldn't see your grandchildren, you couldn't travel, and we never knew when it was going to end. Now, I am basically speaking of people in my age group who were more at risk, or for people that had compromising illnesses who also were at a higher risk. And this, of course, was all before the vaccine came out, and it was actually all before the Delta variant as well. So what do you do? What do you do with yourself when you know, or actually you don't know, you know it's going to be a while, but you don't know how long. For all we knew, this could go on for years before a vaccine was invented, okay? We had no idea. Well, you could read, and that was great, but how long can you sit in a chair? Second of all, I could knit, because I knit tons of sweaters up north where it's cold, but in Charleston, summer is like 8 months out of the year, and you certainly don't need wool. And then I could bake. But I don't know where you live, but in Charleston, you couldn't find sourdough, you couldn't find yeast, you couldn't find flour. Plus the fact is that I love to bake, and I knew that I would eat everything and I would gain a lot of weight. And I've never been able to lose weight easily. It's probably the one task that I have to say is the Herculean task. So what do I do? What do I do and still be productive? Because my curse is that I have to be productive in life. I can't just sit and relax. That doesn't exist. Well, I could paint my emotions. And so that's what I set myself out to do during the course of COVID. And I also said to myself, not only will you paint each emotion as it comes up, but you're going to push yourself and to try to be a little bit more creative, a little bit more abstract in how you look at things. Start using a little bit more geometric shapes. Start making it maybe color combinations that you might not ordinarily have used. So there are 12 paintings in this series, and we will continue through the series. And I will show you. Now, this was the last one. I should have done this, but I didn't. Okay. All right, now I'm consciously expressing my emotions. This is the first one in the series of 12, and I will show them the way I painted them. So this is a small painting called The Blues. It's only 12 by 12. And obviously, we say it's the blues, and so it's a blue color, and you can identify with that. We also were stuck in our homes, and our homes, which we love, were beginning to feel like jails. All right. So I would say this is a pretty easy adaptation of what I was trying to bring forth. The second one, I wanted to show how alone we are and how, I would say, fraught with conflicting emotions or fraught with loneliness one is. And so I wanted to have colors that vibrated against each other. That was definitely a tack that I wanted to use. And again, the bars of the jail. But this time, instead of having them vertical, I had them come together off the canvas, of course. It would come together in an apex. And that apex would be when COVID would be over, a vaccine would be invented, and we would be able to leave our house. And being alone is a struggle as well. Okay. Now here's the first painting where I really, for me anyway, went out of the box the most. Again, you have the vertical lines of the jail cells, but now I'm thinking of jail and I'm thinking, well, what programs have you seen or documentaries have you seen that actually have a picture of a penitentiary? Well, Orange is the New Black is the first one that comes into mind, but there were several other shows, and we know that it's not just the room, the cell that the convict is in. You have the long corridors. So the rectangular stripes, the rectangular, not stripes, shapes represent the corridors, and then the smaller shapes represent the cells. And here you have just tiny little sketches of people in the cells. And one of the things that you always see if you see movies or photographs of convicts are them holding on to the jail cell and basically shaking them and saying, I want out. And that's how we were feeling. We wanted out. And the color, again, the color vibration is to show the tension that we're feeling at the same time. We're confined, but there's a lot of energy that is being expended by ourselves, but is really not going anywhere. Now, this was the first time that I took old paintings that I felt were not up to par, and I used them as backdrops. So any of the thin lines are the colors that are showing through of the painting that's underneath. And of course, the colors on top were thought out how to relate to the colors underneath. So it's not a completely haphazard viewpoint. And these shapes here are not rectangles and squares, because if you look around a house, you will find sloping walls, and you'll find gables in houses, and you'll find attic rooms where you have slanted ceilings. So I decided I would use triangular shapes and odd shapes to give the feeling of people being hemmed in on one hand, people pushing out against their restraints, being a little bit depressed and dejected because they were stuck. Or maybe you could look at this figure in the middle and just think he's looking out the window, however your mental way of looking things is. And because we were living such a unwhole life, not a complete life, I would say, that's why I put in parts of people's bodies. Now, as I said to several people before, it's not so much the painting that takes the time for me. It's the thinking through how I'm going to express the feelings that I'm trying to express. What forms do I use? What shapes do I use? Now, around that time, they were just beginning to talk that scientists were starting to really almost work 24/7 trying to create a vaccine, because people were dying by the tens of thousands, and this was really a bad time. And I don't know on the West Coast, but on the East Coast, we saw images of New York City and truckloads with, unfortunately, truckloads which were acting as morgues. And it was a really very difficult time. So I wanted to give a spiritual feeling to the scientists that were creating the vaccines, because in my mind, their smarts, their work really is guided by an outside force. I mean, so to me, it was sublime. So I did put this halo effect around the scientists, and I consider this painting an ode to scientists. And because our world, whoops, I'm sorry, this happens because I'm using the pointer. The reason I worked with triangles, because our world, now everyday life, was not whole, it was broken up in pieces. And then one day, I'm walking around the backyard and I see mold tracks that are going from my yard to my neighbor's yard. And this was around, I don't know, February, March. And in Charleston, it gets dark around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the winter. So for a large part of the day, or for a good deal of the day, you're in a dark house. And moles live underground. It's dark there as well. So it seemed to me that we were really living like they were living. We were burrowing underneath the ground, except that, of course, we were in houses, but it felt as if we were burrowing and buried under the ground. So I striated the earth and I put the figures in doing things that people generally do. So one woman is reading a paper, another person is having a drink, another woman is, in my mind, watching TV. The TV didn't look good there. And the vertical blue lines are the air shafts coming from the top of the ground. Because that's what you see when you're looking at moles. You see tracks and then you see holes where they go deep down in the ground. Now, one of the things that I know a lot of grandmothers missed, and my grandkids live in Boston, there was no hugging. There was no hugging your child. There was no hugging your grandchild. And that really hurt. And I happened to have a painting where there were arms in it. So I kept one set of arms, got rid of the rest of the painting, and realized that we need connection. We need to touch each other. We need to hold each other. That hug must release serotonin in our brain if it makes us feel good. And we were not getting that. And then, since I felt that hugs are such a primary connection, I painted the painting in primary colors, in red, yellow, and blue. And this blue hand that's up on the top middle is a hamsa, which in the Middle East is a good luck charm. Well, it's many other things, but basically in this case, I wanted to be a good luck charm. Now, again, we were struggling. We were struggling to get out physically. We were struggling mentally because we were stuck in the house. This is also a painting done over a painting. As you can see, the light purples and the darker purples, the oranges, and even the light gray purples are all from the color underneath. Even though I knew that when you see the old-fashioned prison uniforms were black and white. I think they were black and white horizontal, but I painted them black and white vertical. Today, I think they're orange, but in any case. So this basically was trying to show that we are prisoners. We're stuck in our house. We're struggling against it, and there's not much we can do about it. And then again, I was out in my yard and I saw some butterflies, and I thought of the cocoons that butterflies create. And then, because we had been relatively recently in the Far East and in Indochina, where there's so much silk, I was thinking about the cocoon from the silkworm. So here we are as a couple, my husband and I, we're cocooned within our house, so that I use natural colors and the green colors. The horizontal greens are really the silk threads that are being created in the silk cocoon. And yes, it could be looked at as comfy and cozy if you can get out, but if you can't get out of your house, then this can be looked at as trapped in and wrapped up. And in a way, I was thinking of the mummy, how the mummies are wrapped up, right? Okay. Now, our world, as far as I was concerned, was fractured. And it was fractured visually as well, because we were going to a lot of Zoom meetings. And in a Zoom meeting, you don't necessarily have vertical walls and horizontal walls. You have a bit of a bed, a bit of a photograph or a painting behind the person, a half a person as they're walking through the room. So things are pretty much off kilter. And this off kilter was affecting us. It was pushing against us. It was unstabilizing us. It was getting us out of our equilibrium. And this is what fractured stands for. Our world was definitely shaken up, and it was pushing us back and shaking us up. Now, this one is interesting because this is a personal statement. When I go out of the house, I don't always wear a hat, but I will tend to put on an outfit that gives me some pleasure in, I would say, in its artistic components. I wear makeup, I'll wear jewelry, sometimes I'll wear a hat. I don't know if one considers it's armor, but I just consider it a personal expression. And I couldn't do that. I mean, if I put on all that stuff and I'm walking around the house, what good will it do me? So yes, I'm in my painting clothes, I'm in my yoga clothes because I'm listening and doing my yoga classes online, and my walking clothes, and they're the same clothes, and I'm getting bored. And it really is making me feel that part of my personality is leaving, and part of my creative expression is leaving. So I painted a model, you know, all gotten up, and then I had to obliterate it. And that was the hardest part of the painting, because although I tried it on a couple of pieces of paper, you never know what you're going to get, and I could have ruined the whole painting. But this wash over the figure is showing, well, that's the way it used to be, but you ain't that way now. And then it continued on till I felt that I was being erased. I wasn't even there anymore. I mean, I wasn't going to meetings. I wasn't using my mind with other people. I wasn't solving problems. The vitality of my mind, and I guess my world, was closing down and being erased. And I felt that I was becoming the invisible woman. But then the vaccine was invented. And for a little while, we thought we would be out of the woods. It's true that we still have the Delta variant and we still have to be careful, but this was the feeling of joy that we could just literally skip out of the house. Now, here again is an older painting, and you could tell it's painted a little bit differently. The tree was painted of a iconic tree in Charleston, South Carolina, called Angel Oak. And it's painted with more brushwork. And one of the quote styles that I was painting in several years ago, because that painting is at least 20 something years old. And I never painted over it, but I thought, this is perfect. This is what I want to show. We're outside of the house, we're back into nature. And I like the fact that the brushwork gave a feeling of life. So in conclusion, I have to say that I really am happy that my father pushed me to find my imagination. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Oh, Renee, thank you so much. What an insightful, lively conversation or talk. It was so good.
Thank you.
If it would be possible, I would love for all of us to give Renee a little silent round of applause.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We do have some questions.
Sure.
And comments. Your color combinations are amazing. How do you start choosing the colors for each piece?
Good question. It has a lot to do with the mood that I want to create. So that obviously I'm not going to have bright colors if I want to have something very sensitive or very contemplative. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it has to do with all the paint that I have left over from another painting that I'll mix all together, and I'll say, oh, this is just right for this, or I'll save it. I'll save the paint for another painting. And as I was talking to somebody the other day, you save the painting, or you can save the paint in plastic containers with lids on it, and you freeze the paint so that you don't waste any, because, you know, I make nice batches of it. And I have to also say that each color could be 6 or 7 colors. So I have to make enough because I'll never be able to make it again. Approximately, but not the exact same.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you ever, let's see, use any photo reference materials, or do your figures come solely from your imagination?
No, I would say the story comes from my imagination, but the figures, I might see a figure in a book that I like the body language to, or in a magazine, a fashion magazine, or just online, or see somebody that's, some of my paintings are just from photographs in traveling. You know, I have a camera with me all the time, and I'll see someone sitting in a chair and there's something about that pose, and then I'll make up a story around it.
That's good. Your wonderful and inspiring presentation. Thank you. Let's see. Do you always work in a series? And do you always paint 12 in that series?
That's interesting. Yes, I do like to paint in a series because I think that you then see all sides of an issue, or at least I try to see all sides of an issue. I generally paint about one a month. I paint large pieces, the smallest, well, 16 by 20, but I find that too small. So it's 18 by 24 and 30 by 40 is really my favorite, or 36 by 36. I have occasionally painted 3 feet by 4 feet, but you know, I don't have too many of those. Let's put it that way. So yes, I do like to paint in a series, and I would say a year I will maybe have 14 paintings, 15 paintings, but generally it's one a month.
Oh, that's fantastic. And with them being so large, that's quite a feat. Someone said very happy that you were given coloring books, or that you gave up the coloring books. Oh, and I'm happy you got them to start too. Okay, living in South Carolina, have you felt the desire to paint any works based on the Jim Crow that still exists there? Are these emotions that you can tap into?
That's very interesting. I don't paint any works on, I would have to say I don't paint any works based on the Jim Crow that exists here. I'm very aware of it because I am a TEDx coach, and there are all sorts of issues that come up with who you present, who are presenters, you know, the selection of the people. I'm not involved in the selection, but in, how can I say, the issues that are around, that are surrounded with the Jim Crow, what do you call it, ramifications, let's put it that way. Yeah, so I'm aware of it, but I don't really feel that I've been in the whirlwind of that as much. Now, my husband lived here in Charleston, that's why we're here, and he grew up when it was segregated. And so he would have much, I mean, if he were painting, he would have much more of an insight. But since I'm a refugee, I mean, my parents were refugees from Europe, so I don't have the experience of the Jim Crow as much as I would have a refugee experience. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Hey, Haley, there's a question here. I don't know if it was read, but here's one for you, Renee. Do you journal your feelings, thoughts to help clarify where you are going artistically, i.e. to clarify concepts, emotions to work on, or do you just contemplate and dig in and paint?
Yeah, I just contemplate and dig in and paint. I'm not very good with writing. I've tried doing journals, and my Siri is going off. I don't know why. I don't know if I don't have the zit splash for journals, or yeah, writing never came easy to me.
Well, maybe Renee, if you wrote it down, then you wouldn't need to paint it. So maybe it's just, you know, that's your language.
Yeah.
Yeah. The language of color.
Yeah.
That's great. All right. Is there anything else?
Yeah, but thank you so much for the opportunity to learn. This was fascinating and inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right.
Much.
Okay.
Is there anything else?
I think that is it. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for coming. Haley, you can finish it off if you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Renee. You've given us
Thank
so
you.
much to think about and new ways to consider how our feelings are impacting our work. I really appreciated it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for showing up.
Yeah.